After the Civil War and slavery was abolished, Texans had to find a new way to grow crops in an inexpensive way, so tenant farming and sharecropping was invented. The Freedmen's Bureau was established in March of 1865. It was established to provide relief for the people who were left homeless by the Civil War. In addition, they provided food, clothing, education, and medical care. The Freedmen's Bureau helped freed slaves find work as well as landowners find cheap labor. With the Freedmen's Bureau also came tenant farming and sharecropping. Both were ways to help freed slaves find work and make money. Tenant farming and sharecropping are very similar, but there are some differences also. Sharecropping allows a tenant to rent or borrow land in return for a share of the crop. Usually the whole family would work and their labor would earn their keep. They were provided a house, clothes, and food, and little else. Tenant farmers actually paid the landowner rent for a piece of farmland. The tenants got to plant their own crops and make their own decisions. He then sold his crops to buy what he needed for his family and paid rent to the landowner. This allowed freedmen to be more independent. The harder they worked, the greater they would benefit. The next big economic boom was the start of the cattle industry. People raised cattle on ranches and cowboys would drive them up north. When all the buffaloes were killed in the 1860s, there was a high demand for cattle in the northern states. Texas became the main cattle producing state. Being a cattle driver was a very good job at the time in Texas. The highest ranking cattle drivers were called trail bosses. They earned about $150 per month. One longhorn in Texas cost about $5, while in other states they costed 20 times as much. An estimated 260,000 cattle crossed the Red River during the 20 years cattle drives lasted. They added in the 1880s due to the expansion of the railroad down to Texas. Steam trains provided many uses, but every railroad costed $2 to $5 million. And even though it allowed many trade deals, it took a long time for the cost to be paid off. Railroads not only affected Texas, but all of America. Before railroads, things like communication, trading, and overall transportation took up to weeks at a time. Nothing was getting done. With all of these changes made in Texas, life became much easier. Families, freedmen, and businessmen found it easier to profit because of the many jobs that were required to create inventions, manage all the cattle, farming, and railroad expansion. With trains, the food, tobacco, cotton, and cattle industries were able to become more successful because transportation was much easier. Without tenant farming, freedmen would never be able to have food, money, and land. Cattle drives offered very well-paying jobs to freedmen and other people. Trains made transportation of people and goods much quicker. This time period was a very important part to the modernization of Texas.